Hello, Wolfenstein community. Wolf ET player here. I'm a lead developer of Return to Castle Wolfenstein community remaster project called Real RTCW. 2 years ago, we celebrated the 20 years since the release of Return to Castle Wolfenstein. And as you might remember, we had a little nice chat with the Grey Matter guys, Mike Denny and Jeremy Ludis. But now, as we celebrate the anniversary of Wolfenstein Enemy Territory, we decided to have a little talk with the legends behind Wolfenstein Enemy Territory, co-founders of Splash Damage, the studio best known for, of course, Wolfenstein Enemy Territory, Quake Wars, Brink, and Dirty Bomb. So today I have here with me Richard Jolly, the founder of the Splash Damage studio and current CEO of the studio, and Arnoud van Meyer, the co-founder of the studio and current CTO. And I also have my colleague from the modding community, William. He is developer of Wolfenstein Enemy Territory single-player conversion, basically a mod for Return to Castle Wolfenstein, which tries to restore the single player. So welcome guys, thank you for coming. As I said, it's really nice to finally speak with you in person.
Thank you, it's nice to meet you both.
Yeah, thank you, nice to meet you.
Hey everyone, bonjour.
Yeah, so
in French.
Yeah, let's start from the beginning. I know you guys started with mods and maps for Wolfenstein, for Quake 3 Arena, I think, and for Counter-Strike. And I know from the personal experience that it takes a certain amount of passion to start creating mods and maps for the games. So I wanted to ask, what got you in video games in general, and specifically in first-person shooters?
I'm going to talk forever on it, so you can probably go first on this one.
So, what got me into video games? I mean, this goes back ages ago. So my dad used to be a teacher, and in the Netherlands, like in the late 80s, they standardized on MSX2s in schools. So during the school holidays, he would take one of the computers back home with him, and obviously we would play games on it. So during the holidays, we had access to a computer, and that's kind of what got me into games and computers initially. Then later on, got my own PC and started playing on that and just exploring it and learning at that. And how I got into first-person shooters, I mean, that was probably just around the days that Doom and the like came out. You just started playing them because everyone was playing them in the early 90s, so it was just the thing to do if you're interested in that field. And that's how I ended up getting into modding as well, because after Doom, around the era, Duke Nukem was available, had the build engine, so you had the full editor suite in there. Probably upset some people because that did come with some text files you could get online to get the editor guidelines, which was probably about 80 pages of text file, which obviously printed out to be able to read it easily. So yeah, that's how I got into level editing and basic scripting, and yeah, grew from there. Yeah, just as any teenager growing up, yeah, just got into games on the PC side.
Yeah, so my first computer was the Commodore 64, which was my dad's work computer, which he had at home. This is like the 80s. And we had a modem as well, which was unheard of back then. So you used to go on BBS boards and download games. Like, it was like kind of a crazy world. So then I went on to the Amiga, which for me is still the golden years of gaming. So many great games on the Amiga. Then I got my first PC, which was a 486 SX33. And I remember playing exactly the same as Arnold, like playing Doom on there, playing Duke Nukem a lot online. And then I think the first experience I had of playing Quake online was just such an amazing. I was playing Quake Deathmatch online and playing against other players. Like I was out of breath and sweating. Just the experience of playing online back then was just like, because it was hard enough to even get on the internet, right? You had to convince your mum to not use telephone so you could use your phone, so you could use the modem and play online, and just getting connected was hard enough. But yeah, that experience after my first like Quake 1 Deathmatch session was just unbelievable. And I thought, wow, this has got to be the future of games. And back then, multiplayer was so niche. Like, no one was playing multiplayer. No one was doing anything. And so I guess the journey of kind of getting into modding is, I never thought you could do games as a career for the longest time. So I was studying to be an architect at university, following that whole route. And I got to the second year of the course and I was back at home playing games again at my parents' place. And my dad said to me, son, I think you're getting a bit old now for games. You need to focus on your career and double down and become an architect, like we said. And it was really kind of those catalyst words that got me to look at, okay, well, I'm going to show him. I'm going to find a way to get games if I can, just like beat the man. And so, yeah, I found the first degree in the world up in Dundee, Scotland. They were teaching games programming because there was no degrees at school at that point. And I went for an interview and said, could I join the second year? So I didn't have to do another. I'd already done 2 years of university. I was like, can I join the second year? They said, yes, you can join the second year if you teach yourself programming. So I bought a bunch of C for Dummies books. I taught myself programming. I mean, I'd done a bunch of Pascal and VB and stuff at A-level. But then I carry on through. I joined the second year. Then while I was at university, I met Arnout. I met a bunch of the other co-founders, and we started basically, we started playing like Quake together online. We were in kind of competing clans. Arnout was in a clan, I was in a different clan. And we got onto a mod for Quake 1 called Team Fortress, which was the very, very first original Team Fortress mod, which Valve then kind of brought into Valve and became Team Fortress Classic and then TF2 and everything else from that. So we were very much inspired by Team Fortress, and we played that a lot. And then I think the source code came out for Quake 1, and there was a whole lot of cheats that started to come out at that point, and so it kind of ruined this mod that we'd loved for so much, and this game that we'd loved for so much. So we thought, maybe we'll try and kind of reimagine this game for Quake 3. And so that's how kind of the origins of the kind of the mod team started. Just we're a group of friends that are really passionate about multiplayer and team-based games, and we thought, okay, let's try and bring this to the Quake 3 engine. So we got early access to the SDK from Robert Duffy, id Software, now CTO. He was head of tools back then. And we started. We're one of the very, very first early mods for Quake 3 at that point, because we got access to it early, right, Arno?
Yeah, we got it very early. I think it also helped because we were already talking to those people. At the same time, I was working with some of the people on the editing side of things because of the mods. So I worked with the Timothy Bassett and the likes on the QE Radiant and GTK Radiant tool suite. We knew like Duffy and Robert used to work on that as well. So we kind of basically had a context there already. Yeah, so slowly built up the relationship with it. I think basically, yeah, it was also Jean-Paul van Waveren, like Mr. Elusive, who basically did a bunch of Gladiator bots. I believe it was Gladiator bots.
Yes.
Back in the days for Quake 2, was being hired by it to work on the Quake 3 bots. He was still based in the Netherlands, so I actually met up with him a few times at very, very early, I think it was IGDA meetings, hosted by, back then, the Lost Boys, which is now Guerrilla Games in Amsterdam. But yeah, there wasn't much of a games development scene in the Netherlands. It was literally just them and a few small independents, which was one of the reasons why I could remember start Splash Damage. I moved to the UK because that was the only way to really start doing something professionally. You just couldn't really do it in the Netherlands.
I suppose the story of us going commercial was interesting as well, because like we're a mod team, right, at the early days, and we didn't really have any thoughts that even commercial world was a thing we could even do. We were just doing this because it was a passion project and we just really loved making games. And so we got invited out to QuakeCon in 2000 by Robert Duffy from id Software, and we were there and said, "Do you want to come and showcase your mod to anyone?" And by that point, like Q3F had become quite popular, and we had like loads of fan sites back in the day, and yeah, lots of players, and so we're like, "Sure, we'll go to America." I mean, I'd never even been. I don't think I even had a passport at that point. Arnout, I don't think you had. I mean, you weren't even legally old enough to drink at that point, right? In the
So basically, the work of id Software it was the initial point, basically, of your passion to the first-person shooters. I mean, Doom, Quake. So basically, they inspired you to the further modding and stuff. From this comes another question. What was inspiring you during those early days? Because I personally get inspired, of course, by you guys, Splash Damage, Grey Matter guys, who worked on Return to Castle Wolfenstein, ID Software, of course. I mean, John Carmack, John Romero made an amazing job on their games. What was inspiring you during those early days? Oh, and maybe it is inspiring you still nowadays.
I think it was so influential for us, and by the way, it is id Software. It's not ID Software. We learned that the hard way. Yes. Although it used to be Ideas from the Deep, obviously was their original name, but yeah, now they changed it to id. I guess for us it was the fact that, I mean, the mod tools really was the essence of everything for us. I think it was great in putting out these tools for people to, and that was our segue in. I think if mod tools didn't exist, we wouldn't exist. Right? That's for that. And it meant that kind of would-be amateur developers back then, because we had no idea what we were doing. We just had a lot of passion. There was no YouTube in those days either, right? It was just we were looking around for like tutorials and talking on forums and teaching ourselves a lot. I think having those tools and be able to build something and build a game very, very quickly, I think was so useful to us. And again, we had so much love for id Software. Right, there were many other opportunities we had that we turned down for wanting to work with it. Like Valve offered us a deal to work on a mission pack, but at the same time when Gunman Chronicles did a whole bunch of stuff, like Valve came to us and said, "Your mod's really popular, do you want to work with us for us?" And we were like, we really want to work with id, so we need to find a way. Even though we had no kind of relationship with id at that point, we politely said no to Valve in that day because we were so passionately wanted to work with id. The creator of the first-person shooter, right? There was no better mentor than to work alongside them, and that was amazing for us, and it was our dream come true.
So thanks for the origin story details that you've provided. We know that you also worked on various in-game TV production solutions for Quake 3. Can you perhaps elaborate on that? I mean, in the age of online streaming and Twitch, it's kind of hard to understand what kind of work you were doing back then.
I can probably go into this because I spent quite a bit of time working on that stuff back in the day. But yeah, the reason why we got into this is, again, talking origin stories, is as a fledgling games company, you just take kind of any contract that you can take. You're just looking for any work on the market where we're trying to establish ourselves, because this was before we had any contract with it or the like. So we're just looking for work. And one of the opportunities that became available was, it used to be Gamer.tv, it's nowadays, it then became Now TV. They became interested in doing an esports related show. They were big in Korea. Basically, games were big on TV. I actually remember I actually went to Korea for them once, and they were playing esports golf on TV in the early 2000s. So this was, I think, 2001. So, and that's in the hotel room on TV. So yeah, South Korea was definitely quite a bit ahead of that industry compared to the West at that point.
I've got a vision of the future. Just go to Korea. I still have that now. Honestly, it's like stepping forward in time.
But yeah, what they were doing is they were looking at games that were popular more in the West, and then you start looking at like Quake 3 and the like, and they were trying to do the same thing, like let's make a TV show aimed at that audience. The initial bit of work we did was just a very basic, like a HUD box. If you look at the Quake 3 HUD, it's not very watchable. It's great for the player playing itself, but it doesn't really convey the status of the match. So we made a simplified, like as a display, like any kind of sports overlay that just makes it a bit more watchable. But the production approach was still very old-fashioned at this point. They recorded a feed from every single player, and then very old-style TV producer, someone went in the same way how you would do a football game or like a like a Formula One race, someone would go into an edit room with a whole bunch of screens in front of them and would manually cut the match together. So what we did is we helped write some software that effectively recorded a demo on the server side. So we would have a demo file for the whole match, and then we could just do whatever we want with that after the fact. And then wrote some software that automatically picked the best camera moves. Like it was capture flag focused. So if someone picks up the flag or is about to capture the flag, the camera switches to that perspective. We would then start following the player. We would have a few cameras around the map as well. To actually follow the player in with a wider angle as they move around. And that just made the whole process of televising that a lot easier. And that also meant we could have a lot more clans competing in the match because we could actually show more games. And that, I can't remember how many seasons we had of that. But
I think it's like 300 episodes or something crazy. It was a lot.
Yeah.
It was a lot. Yeah.
So you basically made Quake matches watchable.
Yes, yeah. And there's a combination of like the HUD TV technology as well as maps that were more, like the layout was more friendly for TV and easy to understand because they tried to approach a big audience. So they were really looking at matches that would, or maps that would make it more watchable.
Yeah, they were quite simple. I think Wells made that map. We made custom maps for it as well, just so it's full on arena. We had billboards with adverts on them as well. It was like full on the kind of early esports before esports was even a term at that point. But yeah, we had like there'd be a trick jump to kind of get between one flag to the other flag, but it was incredibly hard to do. You had to rocket jump off the wall, I think, and then trim and then get across, and it was incredibly difficult. But if people did pull that off, then it was very spectacular. But yeah, that was early esports at that point. You actually went out to the World Cyber Games because I think we were actually showing some of that there as well, right? So you flew out to Korea.
To Korea, that's why I saw some of that. So yeah, because actually for one World Cyber Games, because it was being televised, they were going to use that software to actually record all the WCG Quake 3 matches. So we added a whole bunch of additional competitive features to the game, so it was actually friendly for the pro players at that point as well.
Yeah. So it just so happened that, I mean, look, the reality was we were young, we were indie, we didn't have a games deal at that point. We needed money to keep ourselves going because I was heavily in student debt at that point. I was like Paul, other co-founder. I was at his house, sleeping on his floor, and I'd made a bed made of t-shirts because I didn't even have enough money to actually buy a mattress. That's how poor we were in the early days, right? But that was it. You were indie, right? We were desperately trying to find a way to get into games for the longest time.
Basically, a source of income, right, for their studio.
Yeah.
So let's slowly get to the Wolfenstein territory. So I know Return to Castle Wolfenstein played an important role in your career. You created Market Garden custom map, you created Game of the Year edition multiplayer maps, and in the end created Ultimate Expansion in the form of enemy territory. So I want to know, what was your initial acquaintance with the Return to Castle Wolfenstein? Was it a multiplayer demo with the MP Beach, or perhaps it was the full retail version?
Yeah, well, it was, I think it was MP Beach was the first one that we played, the very first test. At that point, we're like, this is really good fun. And it had a lot of kind of similarities to Team Fortress, but it kind of like simplified down some of the class play. And so we really enjoyed playing it, MP Beach, at that point. Right, I remember we both played it when it first came out.
Yeah, it was definitely the beta version. So early on. Yeah, it was great fun. It was just a very distilled version, like a more accessible version of some of the gameplay we were already doing. And it was great because they introduced so many more players who like Team Fortress was slightly too hardcore, but it introduced that kind of class-based, objective-based gameplay to a much wider audience.
I think the original design was actually done by Robert Duffy and Kevin Cloud, because I remember seeing, like, they showed us some of the design documents for that, and then they worked with Nerve Software to actually build it. So that was the kind of origins of the multiplayer side.
When we were speaking with the Grey Matter guys, they were blown off by the initial success of the multiplayer demo, because the guys were just developing single-player part. They just were not aware of the multiplayer, but then they saw it, they were just, wow. the beach map. They were playing it in the studio. Everyone was playing it.
So we're talking about multiplayer, and I wanted to ask, what are your thoughts on Return to Castle Wolfenstein single player? Do you think it still holds up? The modding scene is still active, especially since the release of Remaster Reality CV on Steam.
Yeah, the single player. What do you think about that? Have you played it, or you played only multiplayer?
Of course, we played it. Yeah. I mean, obviously, when we were building the Game of the Year maps, it was basically Arnout, myself, and Wills and other levels. I think we're largely the three of us that were building content at that point. I suppose actually to go back a bit, the kind of story about Market Garden. Market Garden again was one of those maps where we were, because this was all pre working with id at that point. It was just like. We'd played the beach map, we'd loved it a lot, and we thought, actually, what if you could just build a really large scale like multiplayer map? But I don't think we even imagined that people would get to like 64 players or higher. I think we were thinking even much smaller. I remember we divided that map up a bit between a few of us, and we were literally in the pub, like designing the layout on a napkin, like in the pub, and then we split out different areas of the map. So I remember I worked on some of the like the ally spawn and then Will's worked on the middle area. I think you worked on the bridge bit, right, on it as well?
I think they did a bit of bridge. I remember spending quite a bit of time on the mansion house.
Yes, you did. Yeah. I feel a whole lot of
the allied spawn point, right? You mean the mansion on the allied spawn?
Yeah. Which was inspired by. I mean, it wasn't. It was. I think there was local buildings around by our office. So I went out with a camera and took a load of photos of the whole kind of building facades, and then turned them into textures, which then we built geometry out of. But I mean, it's by no means like authentic to the time period. It was just this looked like a cool building. Maybe we can try and put something from it in the game. Because again, finding good photo reference, finding good image references again back then was really hard. But yeah, so I'd say Market Garden carried on through. It became incredibly popular. I think it was the biggest third-party map, I think, at the time. I think that further cemented with id that actually maybe it might be quite a good thing for us to start to work with them. So the Game of the Year maps was the big part where we started to actually get full working paid work with id at that point. And so yeah, Arnout, you and I designed a whole bunch of those, and like you said, we went through and we played a whole bunch of the single player. So like we both loved the tram map, right? Like massively. We're like, we need to try and find a way to bring this into multiplayer, because again, we were both kind of obsessed with like moving geometry. It was incredibly temperamental, where you get in the cable car and just get jibbed half the time. That was half the kind of the fun of it. But yeah,
that was one of the reasons, if I remember correctly as well, why we got more involved on the programming side at that point, because yeah, in multiplayer, those kind of moving objects just didn't work. So I remember spending quite a bit of time fixing up a whole bunch of the mover code, so we could actually have those trams work more or less reliable in multiplayer. And at least before then, you just touch them and they would.
You and I remember we just drew that map out on a whiteboard in the office, and we're just like, yeah, this would be such a cool thing to make. So we did that one. We did Rocket as well. And then Dam. So it was Tram, Dam, and Rocket, wasn't it? I think it was the three that we built. Yeah.
So you took the single player layout. Basically, you had the sources, you took it and reimagined it for multiplayer, right?
It's a mix. Like some areas are original, other ones, yeah, we definitely leverage the single player assets.
I think we didn't have a lot of time to actually build levels in, so I think we put some rough kind of sketches and level design topologies together, showed them to id, and then we're like, yeah, we want to make this one. And they're like, great, go with it. I think Rocket was probably the most different of all the other ones.
Yeah, that was the most original one. Yeah.
Do you think it still holds up?
I think so. It's interesting because, so I mean, it's a few years ago now again, but I played through most of it again. And if you compare that to, say, the newer Doom games, so the first thing, like if you play some of the late 2000, early 2010 shooters, they all became much, much slower. And if you go back to Return to Castle Wolfenstein, it's interesting how fast it plays, and almost plays more like, it plays like an arena shooter with guns. And that gameplay is actually what the later Doom games reintroduced. So if you compare it to that, it's a very similar feel. You don't have to play that.
Wolfenstein basically uses Quake-free movement code without any changes, basically. Yeah.
I think it was slightly slower in single player, wasn't it? I think slightly slower than MP.
Maybe a little bit, but strafe jump was still there, basically. So, yeah. So, by the way, why you brought back strafe jump in enemy territory? Because as I remember in multiplayer of Return to Castle Wolfenstein, it was nerfed. So basically you jumped, then you get stuck and you can't chain jump like in Quake 3. So why you brought this back in enemy territory?
Going on out.
I'm trying to remember a few things. So wasn't
it a bug that you fixed?
There's a few things. There was definitely a movement bug we fixed at some point, which reintroduced that. But also, part of the reason for that, there was actually there was a prediction issue. There was a prediction bug. So what was actually happening is that the jump on the client was being mispredicted. So the client might think you can jump, but the server would have a different timer, and the server would actually say, no, you don't jump. So what actually happens is you would jump, and then you would, the server would say, no, you can't jump, but the client says, yes, you would jump. So you would, on the client side, you would see a little hop that happens. I fixed that at some point, because obviously you want the client and the server to be in sync, because on the client, you really want to see what actually happens. So I introduced the same timer on the client side, but that felt incredibly bad, because you would jump and you would not be able to jump again. And because that felt so bad, we effectively reintroduced some of that second hop. I can't remember what the exact end solution ended up being. It's quite a while ago, but I believe we did reintroduce some of that, and we synchronized the corrected timer with the client and the server. So you probably regained some of that movement, but it was actually fair, because I think what actually happened with RCW at sometimes it might feel like you can, the server would actually roll you back. So on the client, the prediction would make it feel like you could strafe jump, but you couldn't really. So at least we made it consistent. So the whole network model just worked better.
I think it was more a happy accident, to be honest. And I don't think we really intended to. I mean, we started to see the competitive scene of people like crazy trim jumping, and we're like, oh my god, we had no idea it was going to get as cool as this. But yeah.
And because we had some of our larger maps in Wolfenstein as well, it definitely came up in playtesting, and it just felt better for traversing some of those larger distances.
Yeah. So, guys, enemy territory was your first major video game project. What was your exact responsibilities again? I think Arnaud, you were responsible for the code, basically, and Richard, you were like a game designer of a.
We kind of did everything. To be honest, like when you're indie and you're so small, you have to kind of do everything. So Arnaud did level design, I did level design, I did textures, I did UI, Arnaud did coding for UI. Like we did design, like map design, everything. It was a mix. So it's far less delineated than it is now from a game development perspective.
Just like in the modding scene, you basically do everything.
Yeah.
So speaking about the size of the team back then, what can you tell us about the atmosphere and the general workflow within the studio during that time? I've seen some photos, and it feels like watching a group of friends gathered around a campfire, honestly. Except the fire is a whiteboard and the trees are computers.
Very poetic. Yes, I don't think it was near. I mean, we were very, very passionate, but incredibly disorganized. I think it was the passion that was driving us through more than anything else. I remember we used to start work at midday, right, Arnaud? Like, and then probably work till about midnight. Like, it was kind of weird hours.
Midnight was early. It definitely wasn't a healthy work-life balance. I could tell you that.
Yeah. It was. We were there because we were so passionate about what we do, and what we do, go home, and then we'd only be wanted to work on mods anyway. So for us, it was just that kind of raw passion. But I think as we matured as a studio, we got to get a little bit more professional. But I'd say early on, like, it was kind of like the id mantra of game development was when it's done, and that was kind of like how we were schooled for the early days until we learnt about things like production. But it was great fun. I mean, I think the fact you could kind of just play your own game and bond over it. We were just massive friends. We were in each other's company the whole time, and we got on really well. And I think that's the key kind of essence to Splash Damage is building games that form lifelong friendships. And yeah, we're still lifelong friends even now, right?
So there was the challenge in the end. The work was getting done in in friendly environments way.
There's always challenges, and it's actually an interesting thing for us was actually getting the deal to actually work on that.
Was the most challenging thing, I think.
Less so, because I mean, as I said earlier already, like myself and Gordon as well, like we were actually worked on the editor as well, and like Randy Reddick that worked for us, he did QQMap too. So we actually had quite a few people working for us that were quite involved in the tool chain. Which I think definitely was a plus, because if something was broken, we would just fix it or we would add a feature. So, but that definitely helped.
Did the cancellation of the single-player component of Enemy Territory affect development of the multiplayer part you were in charge of in any capacity?
The story for us even getting the deal was interesting. So. We obviously it approached us and said that they wanted to make an expansion pack for Return to Wolfenstein, and it wasn't called Enemy Territory back then, and there was going to be two components to it: single player version and a multiplayer version. And I don't think we've ever talked about this, but we pitched for the single player version. So we spent ages making a single player level. And we did loads of VO for it. I did VO recording. Our sound guy, Tim, did. I was doing really bad German voices for some of the soldiers. And it was the BJ Blazkowicz had landed on a church which we had modelled on a local church near to the office. And then he had to kind of work his way through the environment to get onto a train to get to a camp. And we added a crossbow in there, and there was loads of other cool things we did. So we spent ages making that, and I think we had a very tight deadline of 2 weeks or something. I think to build it.
It felt like ages. We had 1 week to build it, so we were, and because we had to make some engine changes as well, we were given the Quake 3 the RTCW source code at that point. So we had a few days to both familiarize ourselves with that and make the whole level. Yeah, that was one very long week. But
so you pitched initially for the single player, right? So you wanted to make single player, but in the end it was pitched to the Mad Dog software. Now I think it's Rockstar New England, I think. So do you have any information why it was cancelled in the end? Because I read the changelog, which is I found in Enemy Territory source code, and Mad Dog software was committing many AI changes, for instance, NPC changes, and it was fine until I think early 2003. Then they stopped committing anything to the builds completely. It was just splash damage, no Mad Dog software at all. Do you have any insights on why it was cancelled in the end?
I think for us, I think that was the weird story, right? So when we submitted that pitch to id with the single player, that they said to us, yeah, it's great, but you guys are probably better at multiplayer. You should just focus on the multiplayer side of things. And so kind of that's what we did. So we doubled down on just on making the multiplayer as fun as we could. So we did watching a whole bunch of like war movies, like the map Gold Rush was basically a design that I wrote, where I just watched the movie Kelly's Heroes like the weekend before, and that was the inspiration for that map design. We just kind of like, and then the other big thing on that was like, so much of the level topologies are all on kind of a flat plane. I want to do something a little bit different. So I remember I was trying to explain to the level designers that we want to do something a little bit different, just have this kind of undulation of terrain, to have this jetty coming down. You see the bank, you can't get to it yet with the tank, and you're coming back and then I'm coming down to it. So I remember blocking it out in Max, in 3D Studio Max at the time, just to kind of give the idea of this is the general kind of topology, because I was rubbish in Radiant. I didn't like it that much. I was largely more on the art side of things as much as I could, and brushes were constraining, whereas polygons I could bash them together much quicker. So that was the inspiration for that map. But I guess They were just desperate in terms of playability. There was a lot more challenges in trying to make a single player experience that matched alongside what we had on the multiplayer focus. I think it was just deemed that the multiplayer was so fun and had so much potential that we were just going to double down on that and just pause work on the single player.
I'm going to have a subsidiary question now. What are your favorite movies? And did they inspire enemy territory? You mentioned Kelly's Heroes and a bunch of other movies in an article on Splash Damage website, I think. And I read that article and used these movies as inspiration to create the stories of my mod, Enemy Territory single player. And even included some references here and there. How did they influence the development of the game and the creation of the maps on your end? I know for a fact that Oasis was based on Raiders of the Lost Ark, for example. Is this because they're your favorite movies, perhaps? Or at least some of them?
No. Keep going.
Well, I mean, movies were a huge inspiration. I think early on we were hearing some of the Medal of Honor maps were all taking their kind of inspiration, and Medal of Honor games were all taking their inspiration from movies. So this was kind of like pre-COD days, right? So, and then Infinity Ward carried on that charge of just like looking at movie inspirations and kind of bringing them forward. So, like the first, obviously, Beach Landing was very much inspired by Saving Private Ryan. I think for us, there was many movies that inspired us. I mean, like for the Market Garden, it was Bridge Too Far, right? Without doubt, was kind of the inspiration point for that. There was Eagle's Landing, was it called? Which we had a map that we didn't release called Eagle's. No, we did release Eagle's Nest, didn't we? I think that was.
I don't think so, because I think there were two maps that were further along. But
that was I think. Yeah, wasn't that with BT that we were doing that one? The Eagle's Nest. I think we did release it. I think that was after Market Garden. I don't think it was as popular because it wasn't as big. I could be wrong. The memories are fading now. But yeah, I mean, again, there was so little inspiration. Not only inspiration, so little reference points around because early days of the internet, like finding a reference image that's bigger than 200 by 200 pixels was hard enough to begin with, right? Because it's not the internet we have to. It was much, much harder to find anything. So we'd go to movies because we could actually just buy them in store and then just watch them for inspiration. So that was a big reference point. So there was, I mean, we'd watch every single movie that was out then. Again, like Kelly's Heroes, again, we talked about for Gold Rush was a key kind of reference point for us.
Just made sense to me that you obviously use these movies as an inspiration. Because when we had this conversation with Richard on Twitter 2 years ago about your sources of inspiration for the game, I rewatched these movies, some of which I had not ever watched, in fact. And actually, should I say, ironically, they inspired me to create the dialogue and the story that I'll bring to the maps that you guys had created. And it just made so much sense, and it came together so perfectly. So I also wanted you to know that, because it's important. So I have another question now. From the player standpoint in enemy territory, what is your favorite class or map and why? Perhaps a favorite custom map?
I mean, the class I probably end up playing most is a combination between either Engineer or Rambo Medic, to be fair. It's, like, as long as you get to revive, and if you die yourself, it doesn't matter if the objective gets done, right? Like, a kill-death ratio never mattered to me, as long as the team wins. So that's how I used to play the game. As far as maps, I mean, honestly, I can't remember the names of third-party maps. It's been so long since I've actually played them, and I'm pretty sure actually there have been plenty of good ones released after I stopped playing it regularly. But
So what was the canals one I need to look at? I can't remember the name of it. That was really good fun. I remember playing that one quite a lot. And base race obviously was really good. Really good. Yeah, no, we were already kind of heads down on enemy territory Quake Wars at that point. So honestly, we guiltily, and I actually regret this now, we weren't paying enough attention to the scene at that point because we were so busy on our next game, and we didn't even really know a lot of it was happening until afterwards. And I remember like some of the Crossfire community really annoyed at us, and we were like, we didn't really know this was happening. Like no one actually told us, and Twitter wasn't really a big thing back then either. So it was just Twitter even exists.
It's okay.
because we started work on Doom 3, in Quake Wars, and the ETL Pro guys picked up a lot of the continued development together with Timothy.
So, what was your favorite stock maps aside from the custom maps? I mean, from the maps you made.
That's hard to pick.
My favorite is Fuel
I
Dump.
always have
Fuel
a
Dump
soft
is,
spot for Gold Rush.
my favorite.
Fuel Dump, yeah. Fuel Dump was based on SP Forest originally.
Yeah. It's called MP. It was initially called MP Forest, as I saw in the code. Yeah.
I mean, we changed a lot in that. Like, we added all kind of the tunnels that were connecting the two maps, and we built out the kind of Fuel Dump much more. But yeah, and I remember playing through, I think it was either Commandos 1 or Commandos 2, and taking some kind of reference points to some of the architecture for that as well. And I remember, I mean, we didn't really have concept art back in those days. It was just like me drawing sketches on the back of line paper because that's all we had time to do. So it was just like, I'd draw this and I'd give it to one of the level designers and just say, yeah, this guy, or we'd talk through about what would be a cool thing to build. And yeah.
And what I like
I'd make some quickly. Go on.
About Fuel Dump is that while playing on Allies' side, you can basically steal a uniform on the first stage, and through the tunnels get to the fuel dump, open the door, and blow the fuel dump without even capturing the first area.
You don't even need to open the door. You just do a trick jump over the wall at the back.
You could hedge that, I think, didn't you? And then you get over the wall. Yeah.
You don't even need that. Like at the back passage, you can basically do a bunny up over the wall. You basically can pick up enough speed. If you land on the right triangle, you get just enough velocity and height to make it over the wall.
I never tried
I think it was the map that had the most iterations.
Covert Ops Engineer meta. I never tried the jump over the wall. I never knew it's possible, to be honest.
Covert Ops was so much fun. That's probably one of my favorite classes, actually, because you'd be wandering around and you'd have to try and act like another player so that they didn't kill you. And it was.
It was inspired by Team Fortress, basically. Yeah.
Oh, it's definitely inspired by the Spy, definitely, right? Yeah, I mean, you see the body of the guy and just the underpants there, where his trousers had gone, just to give you a cue that someone had taken a disguise from someone. And yeah, I remember just making that model very quickly with Frankie, one of our artists at the time, and we just thought it was quite hilarious to just have a guy with his pants left on the floor because then he'd have his outfit stolen. Yeah. Gold Rush is probably my favourite one. Again, I'm very biased, but I think I think we did a lot of interesting things. But again, to come back to Fuel Dump, we did a lot of iteration on the map, and it started as a kind of a forest temperate map, and then later on we looked at kind of weird early mega texture system for that as well, where we were actually doing like projections onto the map and bespoke painting stuff when we started to move to the kind of snowy theme.
Yeah, Randy was playing with a bunch of things on Future Map to see if we could do more with that. Some of that actually I think persisted on the live map side, but we couldn't do it on the main texturing side. We just didn't have no memory for that. Yeah, that map went through quite a few variations, especially the final base. Yeah, think about the maps. I think the one I probably ended up playing the most in it, because I would say Fuel Dump, but Fuel Dump I spent so much time during development playing because it was the first map we had, hence knowing the trick jumps and all that kind of stuff. Is that when the game actually came out, you were a little bit bored of it at that point already. So I'll probably spend the most time playing on Oasis. But Oasis is interesting well because the early version of the map just didn't work at all. And I remember I think Simon basically just got fed up with that map at some point after some late week playtests, and he just ripped the whole map apart. I think it was like a week before Milestone or something. We had to do an Activision, and he ripped the whole map apart into different bits. And then we came back on a Monday at one point, and he just said, "And this is a new version of the map," and he just completely shuffled around into something that flowed a lot better.
I think the water tunnels were added later, weren't they? We had the two-prong version in.
Yeah, because the original version had a single tunnel that just continued on. We split those up into multiple. You can still see that if you go under that. Like there's one kind of mesh just blocks off part of the corridor.
Forgot about that. Yeah.
Getting back to the matter of cut content, was there any cut maps that just didn't made it to the final release? You mentioned Eagle Nest, I think.
I'm pretty sure we released Eagle Nest. I think that wasn't. That was. I think that was MP.
I think that was I think that was an RCW map. Yeah. There were definitely a few maps we didn't release. Funny enough, the first map we showed off to the press never made it into the game.
What was that?
It was what was it?
Nero Order. That one.
Yeah, Nero Order. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there was a map of two parts. Like the first half of it were great. The final objective didn't at all. It was basically a map where you were traveling through a canyon and there were obstacles along the way. You had to clear out air defenses, so a plane that flew through the canyon could bomb the barriers. So you would take out an air defense and then barrier by barrier would be destroyed, so you slowly can make your way through the canyon. And then you got to a big open airfield where you had to blow up the final plane that was standing on the
It was European or African map?
African,
right. So perhaps any other cut content, like maybe weapons, maybe cut classes, even anything like that?
No, there were a few other levels. We had one based in Colditz, which was basically allies had to escape from Colditz. So you had to basically assemble a glider and then get it up to the roof of the building and then fly out. So we looked at the kind of topologies, the layout of Colditz, that one. We had another more crazy one, which was like a moving train, which we never released. So the train was basically static and the geometry was moving past you. So it looked like the train was moving, wasn't. So and if you fell off the train, you'd die. There was like a kill plane. But yeah, you're basically working your way up the Axis armored car all the way up to the top to kind of destroy it. And I can't really swap between different trains as well on it at one point. I can't remember, but
yeah, there were different routes across the train.
Moving train.
Yeah, we did. And then what else did we do? I think there was one other one. There was one called Fallen Giant as well, which we had like one of the biggest planes was fallen in the desert. We had mine carts that were driving around. You could jump in a mine cart that would take you to parts of the level. It was too big, that level. Yeah.
That's about the mine carts. Like looking at the more recent TF2 kind of game modes where you push the mine cart along, like. That was basically one of the maps in prototype form.
Yeah, so we had a bunch of crazy ideas. I think some of them were more fun than others, and I think in the end, I think Nero Order was the one that we probably would have released, but we didn't have another two maps that were good enough to go with it in a campaign, so we basically took it back to 6 maps, the original release.
We've lost the first gold crate.
Do you have anything to say about a cut map called You Got Email, perhaps?
Objective secure.
I know for a fact that it was mentioned at some point on your official website in the Wolfen Files article that was published for the 10th anniversary of the game. And yes, the map was called You Got Email. Apparently it was some kind of internal joke, but aside from that I don't know much about it either.
I'll have to go back and read that. There was probably some faux pas or email that someone sent within the studio at one point. I honestly can't remember. This is what 20 years will do to you. Brain is decaying.
Kind of an unplanned question here. Sorry, Waffety player. Why the title Enemy Territory? And subsidiary question, were there any plans for an official expansion to the game? like a GOTY map pack or TCV, but for enemy territory. Kind of a add-on.
So I remember we were working with Kevin Cloud at id at the time, talking about lots of different ideas, and we had a few. But I think enemy territory was the one that stuck with everyone, and it was really, we were thinking, enemy territory was almost like a different brand in itself to Wolfenstein, and could we detach the two and do something different for the future? So obviously enemy territory Quake Wars was then what we went on to make after that one, and so I think it just kind of it stuck from there. But I remember talking with Kevin and Paul at the time about a whole bunch of different ideas, and that was really just the one that stuck. I think it was so much akin to this notion that you're going into enemy territory, you're pushing forward this front line in the game, and so quite nicely to what we were trying to do with the game, with this front line of moving objectives through an environment. So it wasn't just back and forth tug of war all the time, apart from obviously the Oasis spawn point, which is always a nightmare for that. But with a flag. And then what was the other point of your question?
Was there any expansion? I mean, official expansion is planned for enemy territory.
No, because again, we were a small team. I think we were like 14 people at the end of enemy territory at that point, right? So and at that point, id really wanted some help on Doom 3. So we made this kind of transition to Doom 3 multiplayer, working with them on that. And then alongside that, we started to think of the ideas of what would be the next enemy territory. And that was where we were thinking about the ideas for enemy territory Quake Wars and what became after that. So that was the journey. So there was never really plans, because it never became a sellable product in the end, right? Enemy territory was released for free.